Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. I'm Josh Williams, and for the last time in 2022, I am joined by Mo Stewart. Mo, how do you feel, mate, ahead of this last show of the year?
I didn't quite take it in. It was the last show of the year until you said it then, and I'm like, oh, that's quite sad. It's been quite fun. Well, I've only been on board for the last 6 months or so, but I've enjoyed it immensely. To be honest, my mind is consumed by all the million and one things I've got to do before I go home for Christmas tomorrow morning. But this show is going to be a nice little departure from all that as well.
Yeah, well, we've got plenty to talk about. It's nice to see that Liverpool are now back in action. That's the perks of us recording today on a Friday, which is quite unusual for us. Obviously, Liverpool played Manchester City last night, so we're going to speak a little bit about that, talking points around the game and things. And then we can obviously have a look forward to the return of the Premier League. Liverpool have Aston Villa in a few days, so we can speak about that one. Unai Emery now in charge. But I think we'll start with just last night generally. I found it a difficult game to specifically analyse and be just kind of take conclusions from, really, because I'm in a position where I don't know how much I should take from a game like that. You know, it's the first game in a month. There's a few kids out there. People are getting back to speed. It's away at the Etihad.
Yeah.
So I found it a difficult one to analyse personally.
No, I agree with you. And it's weird because you can kind of say things like that and suddenly get accused of, oh, you're just making excuses, etc., etc. But the facts are the facts. When there are mitigating circumstances, you have to call them out. You have to recognize them. And the first thing that I thought, probably after the first 20 minutes, was not only, oh God, another slow start, but you could tell that everyone was at different levels of fitness and sharpness. And again, there were players in that team who either aren't used to the partnerships on the pitch that they have been put in, or they're just not functioning as well as they should do. And that dysfunction kind of played out early on. But I think it's a difficult game to analyze for more than just that, because I think you can look at that game and say, yes, Manchester City were the better side. They had most of the ball. They had more good chances than Liverpool. But at the same time, I still think that Liverpool caused that team more problems at half pace and half strength than any other team would. And I still think that that's a really important thing to take away. And I think it'll be in the back of City's mind as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, for me, it was like watching the Liverpool before the break, of honest. I think a lot of the same issues felt like they were there. Liverpool was still relatively easy at times to progress through. I don't think the midfield had as much of a presence as you need a midfield to have. But then at the same time, in attack, the attack is kind of that sharp at times that Liverpool can just punish it in any given moment, really. And I think performance-wise throughout the game, I think City were the better team. They posted 18 shots to Liverpool's 7, and their expected goals, I think, was about 2.3, and Liverpool's was about like 0.7. So it was a comfortable win for City, really. But I understand what you're saying in terms of Liverpool did attempt to go toe-to-toe for large periods. Did see more of the ball than a typical side against City. Had a few kids in there. It's away from home, first game in a month. So it's a weird one. I didn't feel like I could watch it and think, right, what have Liverpool been working on for the past month? It felt more like a tune-up game almost.
Yeah, I think in a strange way, it was more concerning because I did know what they had been working on for the last month. Because if you remember back to the pre-season game against Milan, Fabio Carvalho came out and talked about how the counter-pressing and the pressing in particular was something that they were all working on. And at the time, in my mind, I was thinking, they're probably preparing for Man City, been doing that, because that was why it was such a focus. And you saw in that first half, they were trying to do it, and it wasn't successful. I mean, we had a big debate in the pub during the game about this, about why it seemed like Thiago was the one who was coming out of the line to lead the press and leaving space behind him, which City were able to bypass him and get to. But in terms of what it takes to press successfully, It's more than just the energy to get up to the player. It's the angles you take. It's the decisions you make as you're getting closer when you work out, do you need to block a passing lane or do you need to go tighter and make a tackle? All of these multiple calculations happening as you're running at full speed towards a player. City are so good at working out how to beat press. They are the chess masters because that is what it is when you're pressing. It's a chess game. You're working out where the moves are going to be, trying to be 2 or 3 speeds ahead. And City is so good at that. But the reason we had Thiago doing it and not the younger guys is because he has it in his head. Even though they have it in their legs. And so when Carvalho was rushing out there, they were bypassing him quickly. Whereas Thiago, he wasn't getting there either, but he was doing it in a method where you can see, okay, you can see what he's trying to do. So I was a little bit, I can understand the reasoning for why it looked so messy at that point. But by the same token, I do think when you're playing against Manchester City, any weakness you have is exposed, magnified, because they are normally so clinical. And yet, I still think that they weren't as clinical as they should have been. Like you say, they were the better team. They should have put Liverpool away. They were on top for most of this game. If you think about the games between Liverpool and City in the last 5 games where we were unbeaten, the one time that we were really on top in a game, we were 3-0 up at half time. City have never been more than a goal ahead of us in any of those 5 games because they seem to let us hang around. And I don't know what it is. I think we are in their head to such an extent that they know what they have to do, but they aren't able to do it as clinically as they do against Leicester and Newcastle or literally everybody else.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Thiago there. And obviously, if you look at Liverpool's midfield on the day, it was Harvey Elliott, Thiago, and Bajcetic as well as a 3. And I hate bringing this up because it feels like a bit of a recurring theme throughout the season, really, and everybody kind of knows it. But if you do look at that as a 3, and then you think of Jurgen Klopp's game and how you've just touched on pressing is just as much about angles and things like that, it's also just plain and simply about legs and being able to actually cover ground and get up and down the pitch. And those 3 players are not runners, really. All 3 of them are technicians, I'd say. Especially Thiago, obviously. Even on Thiago's peak, he's now 31, by the way. But even at his peak, he was never that runner. And I think he can form part of a pressing unit. But when he's coupled with those 2, it's just not really a that kind of midfield. It's not a Klopp midfield. There's quality in there, but in terms of being suited to certain tasks, if you like, that Liverpool want to take out, it's not really what you're after. And when that's the case, and you're trying to play a specific way, and you haven't really got the suitable personnel completely, you do have the odd little kind of weakness. And as you say, when you're coming up against Manchester City, they will exploit that. They will find the gaps. And I did think that throughout the game, there was too many moments where they were in behind our midfield, running at the last line. And it's just not really what you want. And if you look at the scoreline, I think the scoreline does us a favour, really, because it obviously it says 3-2, but I think we scored from our only 2 shots on target. They both found the net. And if you think of what City could have done if they were firing, City and they weren't firing, they still got 3. So on another day with the same chances, it could have honestly been like a 5-0. Like it was.
Yeah, and I agree. And I was thinking that in the game. But, and this is the thing, right? We can't discount this but. And I know it feels like I'm trying to overgild the lily here. But we say, oh, yeah, on a different day, they've scored more chances. That's been the same for 5 games against Liverpool in a row now. So we can't say, oh, that's a one-off. There must be something about it. And talking about chances, yes, we scored from our only 2 shots on target. We had a total of 7 shots inside the 6-yard box. Now, we've spoken on previous game shows about the quality of chances that Liverpool create and how for too long we're trying to score wonder goals and not really getting into position with our play to get a good shot on target. Yeah, our XG was still only 0.7, but like 7 shots inside the 6-yard box is an improvement in terms of where we were previously.
The 6-yard box.
Yeah, I'm looking at it here right now on SofaScore, and it's got the shots, and there are 7 from within the 6-yard box. 1 from Roberts. Oh no, sorry, I'm reading it wrong. The penalty area.
Yeah, okay.
My bad. But
well, it's still good.
I mean, it's still more than we were doing before, like
Yeah.
I say. And essentially, Nunez had 4 of them and didn't score. Carvalho and Salah obviously scored, and then there's the one from Robertson, which, let's face it, he probably shouldn't have shot. But the fact remains that, with the exception of the Robertson one, I'd say most of those were good quality chances that came from good play. So there are shoots there. I do think against a team other than Man City, we might have actually won that game.
Yeah, we will touch on Nunez. He is a talking point, obviously, as always. But yeah, it's one of them where I wasn't. It's a weird one, really weird one. I wasn't that happy with the performance, really. And as I said, it could have been pretty bad. But then at the same time, there's massive caveats in there that it was the first game in a month, few kids in there, away at the Etihad. City had a much stronger team than I expected as well. So it's one of them where it wasn't great, but I don't think we need to take much from it. Personally, I don't think we need to take definitives from it and start worrying already and like that. I'm much more focused on Villa as that will kind of determine in my head what I expect for the rest of the season a lot more than this game will.
Oh, I agree. I think in terms of the problems we've had, this game told us what we already knew. And particularly, it's almost for anyone who's just seen lots of midfielder speculation over the course of the World Cup and kind of forgotten, well, maybe we don't need a midfielder that much. Then saw that game. So, okay, yeah, we do. That's fine. We're right back into focus. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the players who are going to be playing in against Villa who weren't playing against City, namely Alisson, Van Dijk, Fabinho from the start, hopefully Trent as well. That's the team that you want to assess, because a Liverpool team going forward is going to have those 4 players in it more likely than not. So we need to assess how they look with them rather than just in this first game back.
Yeah, what I will say as well, just as like a closing point, I never really like saying this, but I think it could, in a way, if you want to look at positively, it could almost benefit us that we lost this game, because Liverpool don't have too much depth at the minute, particularly in attack. We've basically got 3 lads in terms of Firmino, Nunez and Salah, and the rest are like second string players who should gain minutes here and there, but they shouldn't really be starting. So if we got through here, it would have been another 3 games between now and, like, I don't know, early February or whatever. And I just don't think Liverpool have the depth at the minute to really compete across multiple competitions like that. And we're obviously 6th in the Premier League at the minute. I think the biggest priority between now and the end of the season for me is just qualifying for the Champions League, really. That's the biggest priority. And I think if we can put more focus on that, I suppose that is a positive maybe of losing this game against City. You know, we lost to a top team who are probably going to go on and win a competition. And Liverpool now just have a bit more room to focus on games that really matter. And the likes of Nunez, Firmino and Salah in particular can get some rest, because we are quite thin in attack for the next month at least, until Jota starts looking at a return.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, we haven't got Firmino either, have we? And
exactly, yeah.
As much as they were talking about it not being a big one, but I think the quote is big enough for this period, which makes me think that he's not going to be available for Villa, maybe not Leicester as well. So it just makes places where we were already thin that little bit thinner. So, and we have to factor in the fact we've still got 2 Premier League games to try and fit in somewhere in the second half of the season. So yeah, as much as you never want to lose a trophy in a competition where you're the holders, there can be positives to be taken from not having any more League Cup games for sure.
Yeah. So if we stay on kind of talking points around the game, Darwin Nunez. Oh Christ! It's never gonna go away. He's just the relentless talking points. I tweeted a couple of weeks back. It's like a weekly episode, and the episode is just called Nunez. And in each episode, it's either an amazing performance, or he headbutts someone, or he, whatever. It's just relentless with the talking points, the narrative surrounding this kid. But what you can't deny is he is just forever involved, isn't he? He's just always at the heart of everything. And that's certainly not a bad trait to have.
No, it's not a bad trait to have. And I think we saw within this game what he gives us that no one else does at the moment. And that's a threat in behind. Without Diaz in particular, we don't really have that because of the way that Salah's playing at the moment, and also the fact that Salah's always locked up these days. So if we want someone to have space in behind a release ball, for example, it's him. And I do think that the thing we say, we'll get to the missing of the chances, which is the bit that most people focus on, because that is the biggest thing that he can have to decide a game, is scoring goals. But in terms of his movement, in terms of being in position to have those shots, he is starting to influence the way we play in a positive manner. He's allowing us to be a little bit more adventurous, knowing that there's going to be someone in that area if a ball comes in early, for example. So we're able to take teams like Man City, because we were at our most dangerous in that game when they just scored. And that's not something that a team as elite as Man City should ever fall foul to. Yes, you can say they're just getting used to it. But what that means is that we're able to be, as I say, adventurous and take risks in those moments that not a lot of people generally do. And I think a lot of that is down to the fact that we're now getting used to him. And I think when you see how his connection with Salah has developed and is still developing, it's got to the point now where that positive can potentially be so big that it does mitigate a lot of the things that are still aren't right. So, yeah, it's another one of those where you go away from it thinking, God, I wish he'd done X, Y, and Z. But then it's like, but you got to remember he also did X, Y, and Z, which is, Nunez all over.
Yeah. I think he was a threat the whole game, and as you say, he's a massive threat in behind. I particularly loved the race with Laporte. I think it was Laporte. I thought that was great. I think that kind of epitomised one of the real perks of his skill set, really, because considering how tall he is, he just shouldn't really be that fast. No. But he is. He's rapid over. I mean, it was quite a long distance. So I think that's definitely a massive perk of his. And again, in the game, both teams, nobody took more shots than Nunez. So he is that guy. He will just hoover up chances. He's a magnet for being in dangerous areas and things. He did register an assist as well. So this is why it's really weird when it comes to Nunez, and this is why analytics can help specifically with players like him, because the eye test, a lot of people would watch him and think like, he's a bit of a mess and he's all over the place. And if you was to ask most people, to be honest, like, what did you think of his performance overall? If you remove the finishing part, what did you think of his performance? And I think it'd probably be quite mixed. But then you look in, if you look deeper and think of the danger he caused Man City, the threat in behind, the 4 shots, 3 of which were from decent locations, and the assist that he registered. And you could argue that was maybe on a bad day for him. He's just, his floor is really high, is what I'm getting at. Like a bad performance for him, or a flaw performance for him, is still really dangerous. And I've just looked into him this morning, and in all competitions so far this season for Liverpool, he's on 9 goals. Gabriel Jesus is on 5 for Arsenal, and I know he contributes a lot across the board. I'm a fan of Jesus, but what I'm getting at is, in terms of Nunez's floor, his floor is still just packed full of threat, and for that reason he's a really difficult player to analyse. And until he starts banging him in every single week, I do think he will be that player who kind of not splits the fan base, but he is prone to that sort of debate.
Yeah, and I think we've seen it with strikers in the past who have everything but the finish. I think back to the period of time when Emil Heskey was struggling for Liverpool, when he was still contributing loads to the game plan and to the team, but he wasn't able to do the one big highlight part. And the problem is, when you're a striker, those are the bits that stick in people's memories because, as I said, they're the biggest deciders between the results. So you can be a forward and you can do all the things right, and you can get a pat on the back from your manager and your teammates saying you're helping us do what we need to do to win games. But if that one big important bit is missing, then it's always going to be with a caveat, with an asterisk, with a but. And I think part of his problem, particularly in this game with the shots, was that they were all so similar and he missed them all in exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And between those three shots that all went past the far post, it wasn't like they were getting closer. If anything, the opposite.
Yeah.
So you look at that and you think, well, is he going to get it? But I still think he is. And I don't know if this is just, dumb optimism, but I do still think he can get to a point where he's not having to think about it. He can just finish. And we've seen people who at times look like poor finishers turn into good finishers at short periods of time. I think Raheem Sterling. I think Bobby Firmino. There's times when you don't back him, and then there are times when you just know he's going to score. And I think Nunez can get into that streak as well.
Yeah, Luis Suarez as well comes to mind with that. I think when Suarez first come to Liverpool, he seemed a bit all over the place. And then out of nowhere, his end product just received such a boost. So yeah, I think I've said this a number of times over the years on this show, and it really conflicts with like a traditional perspective on the game. But when it comes to these players, we should really do as much as we can to not judge them based on the goals and the finishes, and we should judge them just as much on their tendency to get the shots and get in those positions and things like that. Finishing just kind of happens. It's such a fickle, volatile skill. It's difficult to repeat and things like that. Players go through peaks and troughs and things, and it just kind of happens. And as you say, his shots on the day. I think the reason all of them happen the way they do, for a start, is because he's aiming for the corner. I think if he wants to hit the target, he does, but the goalkeeper probably just saves it. So I think in all three situations, he's aiming for the far corner. He just hasn't been able to execute that. And I think if you was to give him basically an identical shot, but in the left channel rather than the right channel, in which he can then side foot the ball into the corner rather than using his laces, I think he probably hits the target and probably finds the net. But I think the fact he's right-footed and all the shots came on the right, through the right channel, really, and he's using his laces, it is really easy to drag those shots. So I felt sorry for him in a way, and it was just unfortunate that he didn't get any of the shots down the left, because those are much more suited to a right footer.
Yeah, definitely. And that was something that we were discussing while the game was going on. That whole idea of how the inverted wingers has become the norm now. So people are more used to being on the opposite side to their dominant foot than the other side. So opening your body up and curling it into the far corner feels a lot easier than just shooting across the goalkeeper into the far corner. And those little things, like you say, they make a lot of difference. A confident, comfortable striker would maybe by the second or third try to chuck in and get it onto that side. But again, I think when you're under the scrutiny that he's under, and you miss a first couple of shots where you're in your head thinking, I probably should have scored those. Like you say, he's now trying to be super precise and get it right in the corner. And I don't know, maybe sometimes you can't think about it too much. And I always think about what strikers on TV say, pundits. Go back to what you were saying before about it's more important to be in the position than to focus on what happens when you're in that position. The people that have done the job at a high level, they say that. They're probably no better than we do. The management who keep picking him week after week, despite these chances, they think that too. They know better than we do too. So I think we should probably just kind of go with them on that one.
Yeah, I mean, if we was to look at the numbers and apply the numbers to this case, we'll do like a bit of an exercise now. So for people who are tuning in now, have a think about what you've seen from Nunez in the Premier League and the Champions League so far this season, and would you expect him to have scored more or less than expected based on the finishing that you've seen? And the answer is he's bang in line with expectation. He scored pretty much bang on the number of goals he's been expected to score in terms of the shot locations and things like that. So he's not really underperforming. He's not really overperforming either. And a lot of that stems from the number of chances he's getting. Eventually, they go in, basically. And that's just kind of how it works. Last season, we obviously talked up his numbers for Benfica because they were very good. You know, he converted to a high level in the Premier League and in the Premier League in Portugal and the Champions League. He overperformed expected goals by about 10 goals. So he looked like a clinical marksman. And I tweeted last night that across Europe's top 6 leagues, of all the players with 55 shots or more, excluding penalties, he placed top of the whole of Europe's top 6 leagues for conversion. I think he converted 27.2% of his shots into goals.
Wow.
And for a bit of perspective on that, I think Jota, Salah and Mane were all like between 18 and 15% conversion. Nunez are up at 27%. So we looked at that as, he's clinical. Mm-hmm. And he still might be. I still think he's got that in him. But then, now that we've got some more data from Opta, if you look at the season before at Benfica in the Europa League and the Portuguese Premier League, he underperformed by 3 goals. So what all of that kind of says is, above all else, finishing just goes up and down. Really, it's an unpredictable. You have to separate the outcome of the shot from the shot, if you know what I mean. Yeah. It's just the finishing part is just it's almost look at a draw at times. It's that kind of unpredictable.
The other thing as well, the other 2 other things about him. One, he's still only 23. I think that's another thing that's important to remember. And 2, when you're looking at a striker's performance and efficiency, so much is dependent on the team around him. And you look at the Benfica team last season and the way that they were humming, particularly towards the second half of last season. That was a team where everybody knew everybody's tendencies. They were able to work seamlessly and almost instinctively. And you can't underestimate the difference that makes in a player's confidence and calmness in front of goal. And those are the 2 things that you think he's missing right now. So as much as there are things that he needs to improve, I think if the situation around him does improve, then that's another thing I think we'll see him get better at.
Yeah, one of the other areas in terms of numbers that I did look at in the summer when Liverpool signed him was his ability to find a target was also quite prominent. So when I looked at it, he posted a total of 85 shots in the Portuguese Premier League last season. And he hit the target with 44 of them. So that's a shots on target percentage of just over 51%. Again, for using Salah, Luis Diaz, Sadio Mane and Jota, they all found the target about 36% to 38%, around that. Nunez up at 52, really. And across Europe's top 5 leagues, only a select few players took more than 50 shots and found the target with 50% or more of them. Some of them, Neymar, Martin Terrier, Moussa Diaby, Memphis Depay, Vinicius Jr., Wesson Ben Yedder, Juan Mi, and Son Heung-min. Just a few random names, really. But what the numbers do kind of say, certainly based on last season, is when Nunez is kind of in flow and when he's like composed, and maybe he had been at Benfica for a year by this point already, he's just he is cold as anything. He's completely he can be ruthless, he can be clinical, but maybe this is a bedding in period. Maybe this is overthinking. Maybe this is getting used to you basically having less time and space, maybe in English football potentially. But whatever it is, I don't think Nunez is a bad finisher. I've watched a few games with my dad so far, and he's made a few points like he's the kind of striker who needs loads of chances to score. And I'm not sure he is. I know he looks like that now, so far at least, but I don't know if he is yet. Because certainly based on last season, he wasn't that. So it's one we just need to give time. I think it's a difficult one with Nunez because based on looking at his career in the past and things like that, we don't really have that much data on it because he's played for Penarol in Uruguay, Almeria in the Spanish second division. So we don't have that much evidence that he's good or bad when it comes to finishing or whatever. Whereas with someone like Lionel Messi, for example, you have years and years of evidence there to suggest that he's ridiculous when it comes to putting the ball in the net. So
I think as well, the point you made earlier is about even while he's working it out, he's still a high threat. So it's not like he's ever useless while he's on the pitch, and which means that hopefully he will get the time to figure it out and to develop. Obviously, I think to a certain extent as well, scrutiny, the different level of scrutiny that he's under now compared to Benfica. When you're at Benfica, you can kind of wear a bad performance probably a little bit easier because, well, you're more likely to still be in and around the title scenario, even if you play badly once or twice over the course of a season. With Liverpool, particularly the way we are now, particularly the fact that he's come in and immediately had to take probably a larger slice of the burden goal scoring than he should do, simply because of who else is out. So you add all those things into the mix, and you can see how we get to where we are. I'm still in the position where I'm thinking, yes, he can still get there, but it's a tricky one. It really is, because sometimes you can look at a player and think, I saw him be good there, so I know he's got it in him to get back to that place. And there are some times when you see a player and you think that, and then you realize you've been saying that for 2 years, and then you start wonder, is he actually going to get there? Am I believing, or am I looking at a player who is no longer there and not really able to see the player who is there now, which I feel like might be a good segue into the next guy we're talking about.
Yeah, well, the next talking point is on Joe Gomez. Obviously, he started against Manchester City, and I don't think he played well. And to be honest, over since his return, really, I think he's had more of these than good performances. Really, don't want to be too critical on him. Obviously, we touched earlier on why this is the kind of game that's difficult to take definitive conclusions from. But I don't really feel like this is that this is just based on this game. It feels like it's happened quite a lot, and for me, I think it's quite obvious. I think it's just I think he's seriously lacking confidence. Personally, it looks that way anyway because he's hesitant in certain moments, doesn't look wholly committed in certain actions because he's reluctant or something. So and I think when you're in the flow and you just everything's a breeze and everything's going right, you just do all that on autopilot, and it's like he's questioning himself almost, and it's a shame because when he's at his best, he's genuinely one of England's best centre halves.
Agree. And okay, full disclosure, I am a big fan of Gomez. I have been since he first came into the team. He's from the same part of the world as me, so I've always kind of had a bit of an affiliation for him. Some people call it a blind spot. But it does make it harder for me to assess him because I want him to succeed. So I wouldn't say I want him to succeed more than I want any other Liverpool player to succeed, but I feel it more when he doesn't. And so it's harder for me to assess him fairly. And I've been trying to do that. So normally I would accentuate the positives in his game and say that when he moved to right back, his game did improve. But I agree with you to say that the problems we saw last night were not isolated incidents. If you look back to all of the games where he's been bad, And I mean bad, not in terms of just underperforming slightly, but actually bad. I think Napoli away is one of them. I think you see a lot of similar signs where in the first instances of early on in the game, he doesn't feel prepared. He doesn't feel ready. He doesn't feel like he's able to do with everything. And I do think you're right and say it comes down to confidence in his own body. I really do think this is the root of it all. We talk about it's impossible to talk about Joe Gomez without talking about the injuries that he's already overcome. The problem with that, though, is that he's now not as confident in his ability to do the things he used to do. So he's second guessing himself. Can I get there? Should I try and get there, or should I try and stand off? And you can literally see that happening in his mind. The problem is when you're at top level football, that's all it takes, that little second of indecision. And an opponent will see it and they'll stamp on it. And I think it's got to the point now where teams are maybe expecting it. Teams are maybe game planning for it. And that's when you get to the point where it becomes a real problem. And I love Joe. I really do, as I said before. I think that when he's next to Virgil, that confidence is a little bit higher. When he's next to Matip or Konate, and well, less so Konate, when he's next to Matip in particular, you sense that he feels the burden to be the dominant defender, to be the dominant centre back, to do all of the Van Dijk things, the organising, the pressing up high and meeting the ball, all of those things. But it's still not natural to him. And he add that into all of his own second guesses about his own play, and it kind of manifests itself in the performances we're seeing now. I think there's a noticeable moment in the game where Matip basically takes over the lead. And you notice it from the point of view of he's the one who's setting the line. He's the one who's coming out to meet the ball. And once Nat Phillips comes on and Gomez moves to right back, like I said, his performance improves because he's only just thinking about his man. He's not having to think about the whole structure in the same way. And it's a real shame because, like I say, I think back to that 1920 season. I think he was going to be okay. He was going to make sure Liverpool's defense was okay for years and years and years to come. But I'm not sure now. I'm really not sure now. And it breaks my heart to say it.
Yeah, I mean, in his defence, what I will say is that the game that you pointed out then, which also came to mind for me, you said Napoli away. And maybe there's a recurring theme there with him when it comes to when the midfield in particular is wide open and he's got less protection and Liverpool are easily progressed through. He struggles more potentially, and obviously you're going to get progressed through when you're facing Manchester City away from home, and you're going to get progressed through when you're playing against Napoli, especially when you don't have a midfield, and Liverpool don't have a midfield at the minute. So I would be curious to see how Joe Gomez looks when he's got potentially, let's say, a Jude Bellingham and an Enzo Fernandez in front of him. I mean, we can all hope, can't we? But whether that'll happen, we don't know. But
I can't believe we got 39 minutes without mentioning either of those lads, by the way.
I know. But yeah, I would be curious to see how we got on, in that kind of situation, because I do think that our last line in particular this season has received so much less protection than in previous years. Obviously, Nunez is less familiar with our pressing ways anyway from the very front. Diaz, you could say the same. The midfield department is non-existent. And Trent has received a lot of criticism this season. So, in terms of our last line, and Virgil as well has looked miles off it. So, our last line has really been open for exposure this season, and it's a shame really. And I think Gomez has certainly suffered from it. And I think one of the issues he's having at the minute is, I think he's always really been Liverpool's least valuable centre back on the ball in terms of what he offers in possession. Obviously, you think of what Van Dijk does with those crossfield diagonals, the balls over the top. You think of what Matip does with the ball carrying. I thought he was outstanding, by the way, with his contribution to Liverpool's first goal yesterday. And I think Konate is certainly growing when it comes to that sort of thing. You think he's getting a lot more prominent when it comes to carrying the ball, passing through the lines and stuff like that. Gomez, I think, is a bit more simple on the ball and lets other players shine, essentially. Does the basics. Nothing really wrong with that. because I think on the defensive side of the game, he's always been kind of an assured presence who just deals with his 1v1s. He's quick enough to occupy the high defensive line, quick enough to cope when he's dragged out wide because he's familiar as a fullback and stuff. So that's always been the way his game has been. But I think at the minute, the current situation he finds himself in is he's Liverpool's least valuable centre-back on the ball, out of the four at least, not including that Phillips in that. And he's Liverpool's least... what's the word? I don't know, Liverpool's least capable centre-back when it comes to defending at the minute as well. So I don't know what it is. I don't know what he needs to get back. I would like to see him with a midfield in front of him. But it's just a shame because I'm similar to you, Mo. I really like him. I've liked him since his debut, since Rodgers was integrating him as a left-back away at Arsenal and things like that, and he was showing what he was capable of. But you can see it's just a seed of self-doubt in his head because you can... I don't know why, because usually you can determine what's wrong with a player based on, his numbers or tactics or whatever, but this one just does feel like I can pretty confidently say it's confidence, it's self-doubt, and I don't really know why I'm so confident in saying that, but it feels like that's what the issue is.
I think when you look at the way it happens, like the indecision around it, and I mean, the personality of him himself being kind of a quiet, unassuming kind of guy. So when he makes a mistake, he's not the kind of guy who's going to be like ranting or raving or screaming. He's just going to be kind of like head down back to the halfway line sort of thing. So maybe some of that plays into it as well. But I do think it's a fair point you make about the situation around him needing to improve to see that. But again, this is another player who we're talking about in a very specific situation, is still an elite player. But when you add in the fixture list that we've got, the injuries that we've got, those are the problems. We need players who are good in all situations, not just in very specific ones, because we can't guarantee that they're going to get those very specific situations because of all the circumstances I just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool will need a centre-back at some point soon because Matip's contract is due to expire in 18 months and he's now 31. So in 18 months, potentially he's 33. I'm not sure when his birthday is. But I doubt his deal will get extended. And you obviously have Gomez there who's got some recurring issues maybe when it comes to his performances. So Liverpool will need a centre-back sometime soon. It's just going to be interesting to see whether Liverpool sign a player who's going to come in as a potential starter or whether Gomez gets a bit of a boost. Because I think another thing that's questioning Gomez's confidence has just been watching Kanate come in. Seeing a teammate like that can't be good for your confidence because he is. I think Kanate's brilliant, mate. I think he's going to be one of the very best in the world. If not, he's that early now, to be honest. And I think from Gomez's perspective, to see that when you're coming back from an injury, it just can't be good, can it? So, as I said, I feel sorry for him. But we'll move on anyway to Aston Villa before we close. Obviously, they have a new man in charge, Unai Emery, who replaced a certain Steven Gerrard. And what are your thoughts on Emery, out of interest? I mean, it's an interesting appointment.
I think it's a good appointment from Aston Villa. I think when you look, it's a realistic appointment. It's a recognition of where they are in the English football pyramid. And they've found a manager across Europe who's worked well at that level in terms of Europa League, the bottom half of the top half kind of a team. And I think what he's very good at, and people are going to laugh when I say this, but it's true, because all of his players have said it, communication. Emery doesn't leave anybody in any doubt as to what they are supposed to do, to the point of drilling them ad nauseum with the same things over and over and over again. So what you see in him is a manager who has a very clear idea of what he wants to do. And when he has that, and when you couple that with the ability to communicate, that's why you see most of teams improve in the short term when he comes into the team. I think he's still got some question marks of him around transfers and spending in terms of that, but that's not going to be a massive issue for Aston Villa because I think that they've done excuse me, I think they've done a lot of their big spending already in terms of the squad that they've got in. It's just going to be a case of finding the right configuration of those pieces. So I think that they're going to probably be a more dangerous side in the second half of the season than they were first half of the season. And I think that we might get the worst of them because potentially he's had quite a while to work on it.
Yeah, I think for me, I do rate him, and I think he's specifically good as an underdog. Really, when he's taking charge of a team the size of a Sevilla, a Villarreal, and Aston Villa. Really, so I think it's a suitable job for him. One issue I do have is across his career, his league performances have never been particularly outstanding for some reason. He doesn't really tend to overperform in league competitions. It's in knockout competitions where he delivers that. And I think at Aston Villa, unless he delivers a strong league performance to get into Europe, his chances to overperform are going to really be in the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. So whether that's enough for Villa, I don't know. But it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on in the Premier League when, I mean, squad-wise, would you say Villa are like maybe the 10th best squad in the league? Something like that, 7th to 10th maybe?
Yeah, I'd say probably around that. I mean, when I look at the team, they had a friendly recently against Villarreal. In fact, I think it was a week ago. And you look at the team, they played kind of like their first team for an hour, and then they made some substitutions. And you think about the fact that they've still got the goalkeepers to come back in, and you look and think there's enough quality players for Emery to kind of hone a really good 11 with maybe 2 interchangeable subs. Whether or not he's worked that out yet, and the team that they played for an hour against Villarreal is going to be the team we see against Liverpool, I'm not entirely sure. But I think that that's something that they're going to be focusing in on. When you look to his record previously, like you say, in terms of league position at over cups, which is what he's earned his name in, I think what you find in the league, particularly in La Liga, when you're a Villarreal and a Sevilla, there are still lots of games where you're expected to make the play, to dominate the play. And most of Emery's tactics are based around reacting and counter-attacking to a certain extent, rather than forcing the play. And that's where they've fallen down, I think. Also, they've not necessarily been a deeper squad. The Villarreal in particular, I think he was working with a very, very narrow squad. So if you do have injuries and stuff like that, then it has a bigger effect when you can't replace someone with a like for like. He may have that a little bit better, as I say, with Villa. So that might be an improvement. But yeah, it remains to be seen how much momentum they can build. I do think if they get some kind draws, they will be dangerous in the FA Cup, though, for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why over his career he's been good as an underdog, specifically in knockout competitions, is because I think tactically he is very, very good, very meticulous. And I think he's good at coming up with these one-off strategies for isolated games. Mm-hmm. And you can do that when you're in knockout tournaments, whereas I think over the league competition, 38 games against really different opponents all the time and things, I think it's a bit more based on like your philosophies almost and, you know, your consistency way of playing every week, same ways and stuff. But I think that's obviously a threat when it comes to facing Liverpool because they've had lots of time to prepare for this. They can assume the underdog role against a team like Liverpool, and Emery has that opportunity really to come up with an isolated plan specifically to cause Liverpool problems. He did exactly that, certainly for 45 minutes in charge of Villarreal at the end of last season. Liverpool haven't really changed that much since then. In fact, we've arguably got worse. So I think it could be a tricky game back. I don't think it'll be straightforward at all. I think it'll be tough. I think Villa will be really focused and really tactically drilled as to what to expect and how to cause us problems and things like that. So it's a tough return, really.
It is. I mean, when you factor in the fact Boxing Day, 5:30, Villa Park's going to be bouncing. We've been starting slowly. If they get a goal in the first 20 minutes, then it already looks like a massive uphill battle. And I go back to that team that Villa played against Villarreal. I look at the midfield three for that game: Douglas Luiz, Boubacar Kamara, and John McGinn. That's a midfield packed with industry, energy, legs, tackling, and not necessarily kind of painting you pretty pictures. They've got Buendia ahead of them to do that, and Bailey out wide on the left side. So you think about the midfield issues that we've been discussing earlier on in the game. Obviously, you expect Fabinho, who did look better. I think it's fair to flag that up.
Yeah, he
You
did.
expect him to come back into the midfield, so that will help. But you look at that and you think that it could be a tough afternoon.
Yeah, it could. Should we do predictions considering it's the first game back? Why not? Go on.
I think if we can ride out that early period of 20 minutes, as I mentioned, we can get on top. We can silence that crowd. I think, again, taking chances when we get them is going to be key, as I always say. I think we're going to win. I think it's going to be tough, but I think we're going to win.
We need the score, Mo. We need the score.
Okay, 2-1 Liverpool.
That's not a cheerleading score, is it?
No. Well, look, we deal in realism on this show here, Josh. Don't worry.
Yeah. I think for me, I can see a draw, if I'm honest, and I don't want to say that, but I can. I think it'll be a score draw, if anything, maybe 1-1, maybe 2-2. But I think if Liverpool win, I would go with you, Albert. I would say 2-1. But I'm really intrigued to see what we see, because obviously a lot of my prediction there is based on the first half of the season, and technically things should be very different now moving forward. We've got the same group of players, of course, but apart from a few returns in midfield. Villa have got a new coach, so it's a difficult one to predict, really. It's almost impossible, to be honest, but I just think this could be a tough game, and I just hope Liverpool are a lot better than what we saw first half of the season, because if we play like we did the first half of the season for the second half, I'm really not sure we'll get top 4. I hope we do, but,
I mean, if that is the case, then we're relying on other teams getting worse and taking points off of each other, which could happen, but you absolutely don't want to be in a position where you're having to rely on other people, particularly when we've been as good as we have been, as recently as we have been. I think we will be better. When you look back at the second half of the season in May, I think we'll have picked up more points and we'll per game and look better than we did in the first half. Whether that's going to come in the first 2 or 3 games, I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting one to follow. But Mo, thanks for joining us, mate, for the last episode of 2022, sorry. It's been getting ahead of myself there. It's been a pleasure to get you involved, mate.
Thank you very much, man. Genuinely, I want to say thanks to everybody who has embraced me coming onto this show. I know it's been a long, successful show before I got here, and I've had loads of fun doing it, and I look forward to doing it a lot more next year.
Yeah, we look forward to. Mo, have a good Christmas.
You too,
listeners. Mate. Have a good Christmas, and we will see you in 2023.